Hey everyone, if you're a proponent or someone that stands up for freedom of speech or individual rights or freedoms, or even some of those people that are all about collective rights and freedoms, well, every one of those people should at least acknowledge is collective rights. Guess what's contained within a collective? Individuals. Every single collective is comprised of individuals. And the beautiful thing, the beautiful concept of individual rights and freedoms that are afforded to all because they're inalienable and not something that is handed to you by your government. These are things that are just established principles and norms to be a free human being. But if you're all about freedoms, then obviously the very pretense of those freedoms, especially in regards to freedom of speech, is it has to be universal. The minute you try to create some narrative where some people are allowed to have freedom of speech and others aren't, well, then there is no such thing as free speech. Then it's just a matter of picking groups, tribes, or particular individuals as being supreme in some manner, some fashion. That they're allowed to say whatever they got to say, but these people aren't. Well, if you have that pretense, if that concept is actually anything even remotely resembling what runs around in your head, or the logic that resides inside your head, then you might as well just admit right now, you are not a proponent of freedom of speech. And if you're not a proponent of freedom of speech, then the onus is on you. Maybe you should silence yourself and never speak out or vocalize any of your thoughts or opinions, because if you're not willing to allow others to do the same, then what thinks that you should be allowed to do so? What makes you special? Listen to this headline article of the Toronto Star. It's an opinion piece with the headline, "Banning Bannon is Good for Democracy," by Nigel Berriff and Cynthia Levine-Rasky. October 22nd, 2018. Roy Thompson Hall will host a monk debate between Steve Bannon and Dave Frum on November 2nd. The topic is, "Be it resolved, the future of Western politics is populist, not liberal. We encourage all public debate, including those on controversial topics. Such dialogues are a welcome indicator of a democratic society. However, Bannon's invitation to participate should be rescinded, not only because it undermines democratic principles, but also because his presence encourages white nationalist violence." So, once again, there's that exception. Yeah, we're all about giving everyone freedom of speech, but in this exception, or in this case, no, we can't allow it because, ooh, boogeyman, ooh, scary. Well, if someone causes violence, right, there's laws in the books that can deal with that. So if someone actually commits a crime, guess what? Call the cops. But so far as we're talking, it's one of the monk debates that's going to be people on stage that are going to be using the words. And Steve Bannon is the one that's going to be on the stage using his words. Steve Bannon isn't going to be out there soliciting or promoting violence. He's just going to be using his words. So once again, why would you want to silence Steve Bannon on some pretense that, oh, someone else might be violent? Well, if that was the case, if that's the pretense they're going with, well, we might as well just shut down any speech whatsoever, because we see these far leftists are constantly out there using violence as a means to suppress or silence their opponents. But yeah, I don't hear conservatives or Steve Bannon or anyone else out there saying, oh, we got to shut down these lefties from being able to say what they got to say. Actually, I don't hear that at all. Never hear that. Even though these Antifa crowds are not just violent, but use such blatant hatred and vitriol towards their political counterparts or their ideological opponents. I mean, just be universal. Just be consistent in the kind of logic that you're trying to espouse. That would be that's my first suggestion. Let's move on. Since Bannon's days as Trump's former chief strategist and executive chairman of Breitbart News Network, his ambitions have become global in magnitude. His new enterprise, that goes by the pretense name The Movement, facilitates popular support for far-right parties and authoritarian leaders around the world. The Washington Post reports he has consulted with nationalist organizations in France, Italy, Pakistan, Israel, Egypt, Japan, Singapore, Australia, Brazil, and Colombia. Meanwhile, Bannon calls Hungarian President Viktor Orban the most significant guy on the scene right now. Orban's anti-democratic reforms include replacing Supreme Court judges with political allies, orchestrating a state takeover of media outlets, creating bogus opposition parties to ensure repeated majority wins in national elections, and building a fence to keep out refugees. Bannon loves every bit of it. Well, the same could be said for these far leftists. The only difference is it would be the particular groups or tribes that they want to align or promote and give full power to. So really, this is just a struggle for power for what's presented as the far left and the far right. Well, here's a concept, here's an idea. How about we give neither side that kind of pretense of power? How about we actually all get back to very, very, very limited government, so that you far leftists, you far righters, or just the left or the right or anywhere in between, how about nobody can use the big gigantic gun in the room, government, right, which is a monopoly of force or violence. How about we just don't give anyone that power to use against each other? I think that would be the best way to resolve these issues, is just take away this kind of pretense of power authority from anyone. That's literally the whole point of the U.S. Constitution when it was drafted way back into the late 1700s. Actually, we know there's going to be vile, corrupt people from all areas of the political spectrum. So how we deal with that? Well, make government so limited and so restricted in its power and its so-called authority that nobody has the pretense or authority to pick up that gun in the room and use it against anyone that they see as their political or ideological opponents. Hey, that's where libertarians are at. How about people from the left or the right, or the far left or the far right? How about all you people start listening to people like myself and acknowledge that actually we're the only ones that are being reasonable among any of you? Because until that happens, you're just going to have this constant left-right paradigm, this constant battling, where eventually it may very well lead to civil wars and civil conflicts. Libertarians like myself, we're out here trying to say, no. If you're scared of someone on the opposite side, as far as politics or ideology, having so much power to use against you, well, hey, join us. Limit that potential by making government so small that they can't use it for anything to harm you. But no, like I say, both sides of the political aisle, like I say, these ideologues, both of them, they're so similar, it's kind of insane, but both of them want to run to their political perspective corners and double down on the insanity. While, like I say, the sensible people who are constantly overlooked, ignored, or somehow placed in alignment with one of these sides, which we couldn't be any further away from either of them than you could possibly be. At this point in time, the way I think, the kind of things that I espouse, I feel I have no tribe, to be honest. That's how I feel. I have no tribe because I can't align with either side of these political authoritarians. I can't. I refuse to. But what I will say is I do acknowledge that every one of us, the reason why the right will ultimately win in the end if you keep playing these games, the reason why these right-wingers will win in the end is because, I'm sorry, people have, listen, it's biological, it's built right into us that we're all somewhat tribal in nature. We're all going to want to protect our own collective. Whether you like it or not, I sure don't like it. I like to deal with everyone as individuals because that's actually the best way to do it. Because people, just like me, as a white person, hey, I've been caused a lot of harm by other white people. So it's not like I just stand up for white people. I recognize there's some very vile, disgusting, authoritarian white people. But once again, if you give me the choice, even me, with all the knowledge I have and all the objectiveness that I try to bring into every conversation or anything that I deal with, even I will say, listen, better the devil I know than a complete stranger that I don't. And like I say, I'm one of these people that's like, I just don't go with the collective narratives. I'm all about the individual. But if you force people into going tribal with this identity politics bullshit, well, yeah, they're gonna go on that right-wing side. Most people don't want to sell out their own, what they perceive as their own people, especially when we've been raised and indoctrinated under the nationalist sentiment, the nationalist mentality. Every one of us have been educated to think it in nationalist terms. So yeah, you're not going to unwind all that indoctrination just like that and get people to want to align with complete strangers and throw their own peeps under the bus. I just don't know how the left thinks that they could ever be able to pull that one off. Now that's a fait accompli that is just not going to happen, especially at this particular junction. And any attempt to do so will only cause that divide to grow even more, and the anger and resentment to fester, and ultimately may very well manifest, like I say, into some shit. And once real civil conflicts start to take place, well, just ask people throughout the 20th century how that works out. Once you let that cat out of the bag, yeah, it's going to be real hard to try to shove it back in there afterwards. You're going to get banged up real bad and might not make it. Anyways, I'll place a link to this article in the description of the video below. But like I said, like the very thought, or even the very premise of someone using a publication, right? Their right to freedom of speech. The reason why you can say what you got to say in this publication, you know, the Star, is because of freedom of speech. So you're using your inalienable right to freedom of speech to try to silence people that you oppose on ideological or political grounds, to silence them. Listen, if they have bad ideas, let them say what they got to say, because if their ideas are truly as bad or evil or as vile as you suggest, people will reject it. Or at least most people will. Or are you suggesting that most people are just bad fucking people, or they're just too stupid to understand anything, and that they'll fall for whatever rhetoric Steve Bannon says? Well, if that's the case, then they'll fall for any rhetoric, right? If you're saying that they'll fall for Steve Manning's rhetoric, you're basically saying that they'll fall for, I guess, because you're so in opposition and you say he's such a bad person. Well, if they'll fall for that, then wouldn't that lead to a logical conclusion to suggest that, well, they'll fall for anything? And if that's the case, well, maybe you should start teaching people to learn critically. Start thinking critically. Because until that happens, yeah, you're not going to be able to unwind all that indoctrination quick enough to prevent the potential pitfalls of playing this identity politics game. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.